So our topic for today is to really take a good look at what is data, and then how can we use some of the power tools that Microsoft has to offer us to really get a better look at that data, get a good insight on that data, and really make our data help us. I think that's one of the biggest things that businesses maybe miss out on at times, is they have all this data that's available to them, but they're not really sure what to do with it. And some of the things that we can do with it really start with that process of understanding our data and getting our data into a environment that allows us to really see our data and use our data and learn from our data. So that's really the goal today, is to help you understand what your data is, and then take a look at some of the Power BI solutions that Microsoft has to offer you. Some of those are free. You can get them today and start using them immediately, and how those can really help you look at your data maybe in a different way than you have looked at that in the past. So just a little bit about our outline here. We're going to start, just take a real quick idea of what is data, talk a little bit more about that. Then we're going to look at what Power BI is, actually see it in examples. So I'm going to try to stay out of slides as much as possible today and really go in and show how you use Power BI and what the powerful features of it are. And then we're going to actually take that and push that up into the web. So once we get Power BI running and it's on our desktop, the next real feature that we want to look at is how do I put that on the web so that it's shareable, so that other users in my organization can use that data. Once it's up on the web, there are mobile device apps that can be used to view that information. We're also going to dabble a little bit in today what is R. If you're not familiar with R, it's a great analytical package that's actually built to run with Power BI, and it runs by itself as a standalone package also. And really take a look at what that is, and then show some examples of how we can use that inside of our Power BI environment. And then also talk about with SQL Server 2016 coming out here in the next month or two, how is that going to change our BI landscape in our Microsoft world. So we'll take a look at what some of those new features are and how those integrate together in our BI environment. Okay, so let's start with what is data, and this is the kind of boring definition about data. It's facts or statistics that are collected, can be referenced for analytics. There's some type of quantities, characters, or symbols that we can look at them. They're stored by a computer. It's all those kind of boring things when we say what is data, and this is kind of that definition we get. But what I really like to look at is what does that really mean? And the key that we have to see in business nowadays is that data really is all around us. We have so many opportunities to acquire data. We've got Google out there. We've got Twitter feeds that are running. We've got our CRM systems that we use. We've got ERP systems. We've got Facebook. All these things really are opportunities for us to gather data and bring that into some light. Give us the opportunity to understand how that data is used with our business and our organization. And so it's really kind of mind-boggling, and they talk about the growth of data right now. It's something that every 2 years we're doubling the capacity or the amount of data that we're storing. So, if you think about, go back 10, 15 years ago, we had lots of data, but it's growing just drastically right now. And I kind of got a little visual of that is the way we see data. It's everywhere. We have so much connectivity now. You can't leave your house without getting on Facebook or tweeting that you're at a restaurant or something like that. And so the real key is, how do we harness the power of that data for our business? How do we look at how our customers are talking about us in social media and pull that into actual business analytics that drive sales? How do we look at our production systems and determine what downtime affects have on actual productivity. So there's so much that evolves around us. We really need to determine what data means and what that means to our business. And that's a difficult task. As a developer, that's difficult because you might know how to code, but maybe you don't understand the business as much as you should. For the end user that understands business and understands data, they're looking, going, well, how do I get that information into a format that makes sense for people? And I'll even show you today as we go through some examples, you can skew data easily. So those developers don't necessarily know when it's skewed compared to an end user that can look at it and go, no, that's not right. Just based on the presentation of the chart or something, I can tell that that doesn't line up correctly. So we've got a lot of different scenarios that we can see. What that really leads us to is the idea behind data analytics. And how do we really go in and allow our data to work for us? And one of the answers to that is the idea behind Power BI. Okay, so to give you a little time frame of how Power BI came about, Microsoft back in the SQL 2012 days released a product out there called PowerView. And PowerView was really a SharePoint and a SQL Server kind of compatibility plugin component that allowed users to go into SharePoint and build some dashboarding type solutions directly right inside of SharePoint. A good product, but had a lot of implementation problems, and it really didn't maybe take off the way they envisioned. As the Office 365 environment began to grow more and more, Microsoft then released what I call the Power Tools for Excel. And these Power Tools for Excel bring in things like Power View, very similar to what we saw in SharePoint. They bring in a Power Query tool that really allows us to get data from a lot of sources, and then you don't need to be a data expert as far as SQL is concerned. You can go in and manipulate that data and really fine-tune that data the way you need to see it. And then it brought in Power Pivot, which allowed for a little more advanced modeling of that data. And then also the final product in that is what they called Power Maps, and that allowed us to create 3D rendering maps that allowed our data to be placed on top of that. So great tool, but it was primarily released in the Office 365 environment for Excel 2013. They slowly moved all of those features out into a product now called Power BI, and Power BI really is kind of a two-part product that we're going to look at. One is the desktop. This is where we have the authoring capabilities, and then the second part of that is really the web. And the web is where we can place those authored reports up into a cloud environment that again can be opened up in many different ways. I can invite individuals from my organization to see those reports. I can actually take those reports and embed them into another web application. I can do natural query language. So if maybe the report doesn't answer my question, I can actually ask the web to analyze that, and I can ask the question on the website and maybe get a different result than what I was expecting to see or what I didn't write out in a report. So the web really takes that desktop environment and really opens that up to a lot of different scenarios that we might have to see. The great thing about that right now is that the desktop program that we're going to be looking at today is free. So you can go out to Microsoft right now, go to Power BI and download that. And there are even free editions of the web. There's also paid versions, so like anything else, with the paid edition, you're going to get some additional features that you won't have with the free version. But there's a lot that you can do for zero cost to your organization immediately. The other component that we really get inside this Power BI is the ability to really experience this data, as it says, anywhere. There are apps now for iPhones, iPads, Android, Windows 10 that allows your individuals in your workforce to connect to this data and take that data with them on the go. So if they're looking at sales trends or customer information, it makes it real easy for them to access this data. The data can be anywhere, and we'll see that in our connections here in a second, that we really can get data from so many different sources that it makes it such a great tool to us. So again, allows us to really see all our data in one spot. We have live dashboards, which is really nice. They're very interactive. So we're going to see that here in a minute, that as I go in and start to look at my data, not only do I see data presented in a really nice format, I also have the ability to interact. I can click on certain sections of the data to drill down into it more and really get fine-tuned analytics. See a little interaction there. So again, that's kind of the overview of Power BI. And what we're going to look at here is how we can make this tool work for us. So we've got a lot of pieces to it. We've got the Power BI desktop environment, which we're going to start in and really start to write reports. We've got the ability to access data from all these different sources. So we've got the ability to tap into our on-premise data, and we can take a look at that data and that information. We can hit the Microsoft Cloud. So if you've got Office 365, you got SharePoint, Dynamics, running Windows Azure, running Hadoop in the cloud, anything like that, you've got the ability to access your data from there. And then we've got a ton of non-Microsoft Cloud-based capabilities too. Salesforce, Facebook, QuickBooks, different mail programs, Google Analytics. When we think about, again, that evolution of data, there's so much that we can learn from these cloud-based systems. If everybody's tracking their website through Google Analytics, how can I look at trends of website hits and compare those to growth of opportunities? That's one of the things I'm going to be able to pull in and take a look at things like that inside of Power BI. Once that's all there, then it's just a matter of presenting that data to the web or to mobile devices, or in some cases still just using the desktop. There are some reports that I utilize that we don't push out to the web. It's just simply it's something I need, and I want to use that desktop application to do that. All right, so let's take a good close look at how Power BI works here. So I'm going to launch Power BI. I'm going to pull that in so that we can take a quick look at what the Power BI interface looks like, and then also go in and really show some reports. So we're going to show some examples of how we can build quick and easy reports through our Power BI environment. So the first thing I want to talk about is getting data. Before you can really write a report, you've got to have a data source. If we look at Power BI and we take a look at the button at the top that says Get Data, and I'm going to hit that button, it's going to pop up my data wizard. And again, you've got to look at that this tool was really designed for the power user or the data analytical person. Okay, it wasn't designed for the SQL administrator or the query writers or report writers. Even though it's really useful to them, it was built in a way that a standard end user can really jump in and use this. So if we look at our data sources, we don't have time to go through all of these, of course, but as I scroll down, you'll see that there are multiple data sources that are available to you, and that's growing. So Power BI is still kind of technically a beta product, even though it's actually been out for about a year and a half now. and they're releasing new updates about once a month, maybe every other month right now. Every time a new release comes out, we're starting to see more and more data source locations made available to us. So, again, just to pinpoint some of these, we've got the ability to go directly to Salesforce, Google Analytics, Facebook, Dynamics CRM. You can actually hit your Exchange environments. When we start getting into things like big data, we have Hadoop environments. We have another couple big data down here was our Spark environment, our Azure HD Insights. So all of these are a ton of possible locations that we can actually go out and generate data from. We also can grab it from local files. So if you have a comma delimited file that was given to you from a client or for someone else, you can actually just connect right to that local file. Now, the way data works, I want to go ahead and connect to a SQL environment here, is that for Power BI, it is actually going to bring the data back into your Power BI desktop application. Okay, so only Microsoft SQL right now does have an option what they call direct query, and we'll talk about that a little more when we get into updates on SQL Server 2016. But direct query is a streaming connection type that can be made to be a little bit more updated. But everything else is we're going to connect to our data, we're going to model that data, but we're going to then bring that data into our report. You always have the ability, you'll see a refresh button that will allow you to update your data. So if I open a report tomorrow, I want to get the newest data in, I can hit that refresh and reload my data. If it is on the web, excuse me, you do have to build a data gateway if you're accessing on-premise data. So if you're accessing cloud-based data, of course, that will be available on the web just like it would be from your desktop. But data that is sitting on a SQL server behind your firewall, there is a gateway connection that needs to be made if you're going to be placing this report onto a website. So let's go in and make a quick connection to data, and I'll show kind of how easy it is to bring data into your environment. So again, there's no need for query writing. So once you connect to the database, which in a lot of scenarios is one of the hardest parts, I think, for users just to get that information, you are presented with all of your data tables that are available to you. If there were any views created in that database, there's not in this particular database, you would also be presented with those views. So I'm going to create a couple different reports. So the first thing I'm going to do is use a data table called crime data. So this is a actual download from Metro Louisville government that shows all of the reported crimes for a period of time. I think it's somewhere around in 2007 up to whenever it was last downloaded, which was May of this year. And so it's about 700,000, almost 800,000 maybe rows of data that we actually have that we're looking at here. Now, Power BI doesn't load all those in. You see, as I go down, it tells me, hey, this data has been truncated based on size limitations. So what I really want to do is, I can work with 7,000 rows of data, but that might be overwhelming for the report that we're looking at. So I'm going to click on this edit button and show how easy it is for a non-SQL person to actually go in and model the data based on their needs. So the first thing you'll notice in my data is I've got a lot of columns of data here. Some of these are completely unnecessary for the report that I'm going to be writing. So I'm actually going to use my control key on my keyboard, and I'm going to select any of the columns of data that I don't need. These are all in the city of Louisville. They're all in the state of Kentucky, so I don't need any of those. And then I'm easily going to go ahead and I'm going to right click that, and I'm going to say remove columns. And you'll notice quickly that takes my data down into the format that I'm looking for. I can also model my data even a little bit more. So if I want to look at the occurrence date, I can go in, make sure that it's formatted as a date time. I can even add a column if I say, I'd really like to know on the date of occurrence, I really want to break that down to just what month it occurred in. So by selecting that column, I can add a new column and just extract the month out of that date. And so again, I don't have to have the ability to go into SQL and do a date part to get that information. Just real quick and easy right here in that tool, I'm able to do that and better model my data. I'm also going to go ahead and filter this data out. So I'm going to go in, click on my date occurred column again. I'm going to look at my date time filters. And I've got some real simple things. Like if I go to year, I can say I want just this year. I could say give me last year. So I can really kind of build that exactly how I want it. So let's just say we're going to look at last year's data. I'm going to click on last year. You might not notice the little yellow dots going across there, but those are going down and filtering that data out for me. So now I'm just looking at last year's data. If everything's good here, I'm going to go ahead and close and apply, and that's going to actually now go out and query my data. So what occurs in Power BI is as you edit that data, it then goes and retrieves that data after you kind of tell it exactly what you're looking for. So that makes it efficient. So it's not going in, it's going to be really efficient of retrieving that data. It's not retrieving all 700,000 rows. It's just retrieving, in this case, it's about 86,000 rows. And that's what we want. We don't want the data to be overwhelming from our server. Now, on the side of my Power BI environment, I have three little boxes here. The very top one is my report, and that's where I'm going to actually write the report that I'm looking at. My next one is my data. So this allows me to view my data. This also allows me to fine-tune the data. So like if I click on date occurred, I can go to the modeling tab and I can say, you know what, I really want that to be in just short date format. So I can select that and reformat my date the way I like it. So I can really kind of make it simple. And I can do that with any data that is in here. I can really go in and format that to my liking. Some data is going to be summarized. For example, month. I don't need month to be summarized because that's just raw data, even though it is an integer. So you can see here I can go in and tell my month, don't summarize that. And so that just makes it, when I go to use it in my report, it's going to be treated more like text data, even though it's actually an integer. We'll create a quick report here. I'm a visual person. I like to look at maps. I like to look at charts. So we'll start with really a simple map. So I'm going to pull into my report. I'm going to go over to the little visualization section, and we're going to add a map. I can make that as large as I want inside of my report. And then I need to tell it some fields here. So the location is going to be driven by the zip code. And we're simply going to just take a count of crimes to kind of show our bubble charts. So you can see quickly, now I've actually got a nice quick map that shows me a count of basically total crimes, and this was in 2015. Useful. But I can even take that even to another level. So let's say I want to pull in, whoops, didn't mean to change that. Let's change that back to a map. Let's say we want to look at a pie chart. So we'll add a pie chart into my report. And again, I want to look at crime types here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in what my detailed data is. And I'll give you the same thing of count. So now I again see a quick pie chart breakdown. If I don't like that chart, I can click on any of these other charts, and you can see it quickly changes the type of chart, but it presents the same type of data. And the interaction that we see here is really nice. So if I'm looking at my chart and I'll say, well, I really want to focus in on, let's talk about motor vehicle theft. As I select that option in my chart, my bubble chart over here will shift on me. Now, the bubbles are based on percentages, so sometimes when we click, we don't see a huge change in the bubbles because they're just shifting based on the pattern, not necessarily the full size that we're looking at. But you can see it's a really nice interactive chart that I have here. If I'm interested in looking at individual months, I can pull in another little section here for month, and I'm going to build that as a slicer. So now I've got my actual months. Now I need to reformat that data a little bit. So for some reason it did not bring it in or it brought it in as decimal. I want to change that to be a whole number. So just telling it that I'm changing my data type, and I want to make sure that it sorts by the month. That looks good. So if I go back to my report, you'll see that my months have changed. I accidentally have it sorting backwards here. But as you see, if I click on each month, all of my reports are quickly changing on me. So it's a really nice feature that allows me to go in and again, I can build these quick interactive reports to help summarize my data. Let's look at one more example of this. I want to create a new report again real quick. Give it a second here to open. And this is going to be a similar report, but I want to show how we can model data to work together. So just like before, I'm going to say get data. I want to pull that from a database. And this time I'm going to choose a couple different tables. I'm going to choose crimes per day, which is a summary of total count of how many times a particular crime occurred on a particular date. I'm actually going to choose a date masters table, and this is just a table that lists out all the dates and then separates them by month, by day of the week. So it's a really good analytical table. As you're analyzing your data, you want to say, hey, do I have a higher rate of crime on Mondays compared to Sundays, and things like that. And I'm actually also going to pull in weather data because I want to see if there's any correlation with the weather on crime rates. Again, I'm just kind of making this up as I go along as far as how I'm looking at my data. And for each of those, just for time's sake, I'm going to load them. So again, it's going out to those three data sources now, and it's pulling in the data that I've asked for. And I'm going to look at this model tool now. So in my modeling tool, it has now built a relationship. And you can see that these three tables relate to each other based on the date. So if I'm comparing weather information to crime rates, that's one way I compare the data, is that the date and the average temperature of the weather on that particular date, how that maps up to particular crime rates. And we've got the ability to build some really nice charts with that type of solution. So I'm going to pull in a line cluster chart here. And it's going to ask me for my shared access. So my shared access is actually going to be the day. So I'm going to pull my date in. Now when I pull a date in, it actually automatically builds a hierarchy. So it breaks it down to year, quarter, month, and day. I want to actually just use the day. So I'm going to change that to display date. And then I'm going to go and look at my column values. I want to be the average temperature for that day. So now we're seeing, and we're looking back in 2012 here. So there's my average temperature. Looks fairly normal for Ohio Valley, up and down, but we're peaking around July time and then falling back toward the end of the year. And then I'm going to place on top of that, though, is the number of crimes that took place. And so you see now we get an actual dual chart that displays the crime values, or the number of crimes that occurred based on a particular date. And there is some interesting things if you look at this. Again, crime rates very similar to dates, go up and down and up and down. In fact, even in the earlier part of the year in 2012, they actually followed the pattern really close here. If you look, between January and March, the actual trend of crime versus temperature, really, as temperature went up, crime tended to go up at the same time. So not sure 100% if that's a trend, but I thought that was kind of interesting as I was looking at this data. Again, let's show an example of building some slicers in here. So I'm going to bring in the crime type into the scene, and I'm going to make that a slicer. So now if I want to look at any type of particular time, such as burglary, I can do that and kind of compare the results. And even maybe I want to really look at that based on months. So I'm going to bring months into my report, and I'm going to add that as a slicer. Now, immediately, again, in the presentation, you see that months are actually sorted by alphabetical sort, and that doesn't work real well. So that's a modeling thing. So if I go back over to my modeling, look at my date master, and I select the month column, I can actually look at the sort, and I can say, well, I know its month name is the default, but I actually just want to sort by month. So what I'm telling the tool to do is say, well, I know we want to present the name of the month, but when you sort it for presentation, sort it by the month number. And so if I go back to my report now, I should see that sorted not alphabetically, but January, February, March. And again, with my slicers, now I can click, and this one's a little more dramatic change. As I select a month, I'm starting to see the data. And again, if I was analyzing this, I'm trying to look for trends. Is it, as the weather goes up, do I see more thefts? If I look at something like disturbing the peace, does the weather affect that? Well, if you actually look at this, I'd probably want to bring in day of the week. If we look at when people maybe have more of a tendency to disturb the peace, it might be a particular day of the week. So maybe we can bring in days of the week, set those as a type of slicer also. Actually, I would need to summarize those first to not be a count. Tell those not to summarize. And then I could say, well, let's look at Fridays. Is there any relationship Fridays, Saturdays, to Sundays? And again, I'm not going to go through and analyze all the data, but that gives me a good idea and kind of see maybe what days of the week really have a worse disturbance of the peace. So again, as you can see quickly here, in a matter of 15 minutes or so, we've actually built a couple of quick reports that really allow us to see lots of information. Show one other thing on the slicers. You will notice they are multi-selectable, so I can select a range of months that if I want to look at just a particular time period, I can. Okay, so we could go all day in all these different reports that we're creating, but I want to show a little bit more of the functionality. So right now I want to first take this to the web. So let's slip back to our slideshow for 1 second and really just talk about the Power BI website. One of the key advantages of Power BI is that once I've got something that's useful to me, I can take this report and push it right up into my Power BI website. Once it's in my website, then I'm going to have the ability to really go in and utilize that on my mobile devices, share that with other people. I don't have to open my desktop every time I want to view my report. I can just kind of go to my website and my portal. So let's take a look at how we would do that. So let me grab my task manager here. So I'm going to go into Power BI now. I'm going to first real quick save this. And then right here from my menu, I'm going to publish that up into Power BI. So I've already connected, so it's asking me where in my Power BI environment do I want to publish this. So go ahead and push this up into our website. And then once that's up there, it's asking me to go view it. I've already actually got the web page open, so we're just going to pull that over into this window real quick. And I'll do a quick refresh of this. And we'll see now I have my report up in here. Actually, it didn't load. Let me click on that to view it. And so now, right inside of the web page, we see this report. And again, it's still interactive. So as I go in and click on any of the data that I'm looking at, I still got a full-blown interactive report that I can use. If I really like, let's say, this particular chart, and let's say I want to do it with all dates and all values, I can actually pin this. So I can say I want to pin this visual. Ask me which dashboard do I want to pin it to. And so now if I go in and look at my dashboards, I can actually see that visual pinned directly into my dashboard. This is another example. So this is just what they call an opportunity sales example that you can see. I can go in and have a really nice dashboard of data that's out there. So the nice thing about Power BI is they actually have a bunch of built-in example dashboards that you can use to get some ideas behind. You'll notice in the web we have Ask a Question. So I can actually come in here and say I want to look at month with most let's see, crimes. Let's see if we can get it to crimes per day. So this actually then breaks down each month and actually shows me a breakdown of crimes per day inside of there. And again, as you're typing, it's going to really go in and try to help you ask a question. Crimes a day by type. So now it's going to go in and generate a report. So, and this is the nice thing about this natural language query is that individuals that might not even know what type of report they're looking for can just start asking questions and actually get some quick charts and data popped right into the report for them. And if I go over to this visualization field, they can say that wasn't the exact, that's maybe the data I'm looking for, but not the exact report or the exact visualization. And they can click on these different visualizations and change them based on their liking. So again, this is all done directly in the website, accessing the data that we've already presented up there. Really, really useful. If I come back down to reports, show one more thing here. You will see there's, I can change the views of my reports. I can save as, I can print this report. Depending on the actual report, I can even do things like embed it in a website. So this one's not a shared report yet, but I do have the ability to go in and actually build a iframe website to embed that directly in. So a lot that we can do with our analytics and visualization of our reports. A couple quick things I want to look at here. I know we're getting about 15 minutes left, and I definitely want to save some time for answers. The next thing is real quick, just talk about R. One of the nice features that we see in Power BI is the ability to implement R directly inside of that. If you're not familiar with R, R is an analytics tool that is really being driven by things like Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And it really allows you to build a ton of different types of analytical information directly from your data. And we can talk about things like there's lots of different plots that can be made. We can actually use things like Google Maps, and we can interject our data directly on top of a Google Map environment. So there's just so many different things that we can do. It can do predictable outcomes. So we can actually go in and, based on the information that we give it, have it give us the next month of data. And it will go through and show predictions based on the trend of our data and where we should be heading. So there's so many different advantages of R, and really a powerful tool. And the great thing about it is it works directly right inside of Power BI. Now, at this time, it does not work with the Power BI web interface. So anything you do in R would only be available in Power BI, just inside of the tool itself. So we'll take a quick look at that. If I go back into my Power BI environment, and you notice I have this nice big R over here. This allows me to bring in some R data. And again, R is a scripting language. We could spend days and days and days just going over R. But I'll show just a quick example of what R can do. So if I drag in my same fields, let's say I'm going to drag in the number of times that a crime was created, and then I'm also want to bring in the average temperature. So I want to have R kind of analyze for me if there's any correlation to the temperature versus the number of crimes that are actually created here. And then I'm going to paste in a few lines of code. So again, I've already pre-written these so we can go through them. And what this is going to do is I'm asking R to basically create a line plot for me. So, and it's going to look at the number of times of a criminal occurrence that took place based on the average temperature. I do have to enable scripting, and then I can run, and I'll minimize this. And so R is going out right now, and it's analyzing that data, and it's presenting me back with my line chart. Now, on this particular type of data, that might not be a great visualization, but you can see the power of that. And again, what's nice about R is that even as I change my selectors, R is going back out and reanalyzing that data for me. So when we look at R, there's so much that can be done inside of reports from an analytics standpoint. So when you want to start to actually look at your data and start to try to predict out what your sales are going to be over the next 6 months, R is really that tool that can help with that. And I show another example already pre-written, but just the power of mapping. You know, you see a look at an actual baseball field here. This is analytical data based on hit locations, and you can see as I select a different player, R is actually going in and replotting where their hit spots are directly on side of a Google map. So, you know, you can look at, from a mapping standpoint, R allows me to actually do satellite imaging and things like that. Whereas if I was to look at just the map that was built directly inside of Power BI, I can still pinpoint hit locations, but I can't necessarily see them on a world map and really get a good idea of what I'm looking at. So R is really that next step. When you look at Power BI and you look at the functionality, R is what's really going to take it to that next, what we can kind of consider a data scientist level. All right, one last thing I'm going to talk about today is just how does the new SQL Server 2016 product that again is scheduled to be out here in a couple weeks, how does this really affect our BI solution? So a couple things. I'm going to look at a couple different products. One is the integration services piece. That hasn't changed tremendously except for the fact that they continue to open up data sources. So as our data is starting to sit in more places than just our relational databases, Microsoft's going to come in and say, yeah, I know we need to be able to get that data from blob storage, from other places that we might not have been able to get that data from in the past. We're seeing huge changes in our analytical solution, primarily with, like we talked about a little bit ago, the direct query capabilities, so that we can actually still pre-analyze our data, but get more refreshed data where we don't have to rebuild cubes constantly. And then their performance is constantly going up. Reporting services is probably the biggest change from a BI solution. When we go into reporting services, they've really fixed a lot of the problems in the website. It's now full HTML5 compliant, meaning that reporting services is going to be able to work with any browser of your choice now. There's better functionality for printing. If anybody's tried to print reports from reporting service, no, they don't work real well. We've got enhancements to do chart types, and there's a lot of different things that we can do now in reporting services that we weren't able to do in the past. So you can see some of those tree maps, and a lot of this are coming directly from the Power BI environment. We're also going to see in reporting service now mobile reporting options. So we're going to be able to go out and build reports that are focused and built specifically for iOS and our mobile devices, whereas in the past you were just kind of squeezing that report in. Power BI is also going to become part of reporting services for on-premise. So these Power BI reports that we're looking at are eventually going to be able to actually be placed up into reporting services, so that you don't have to use the Power BI cloud environment. So that's going to allow you to take Power BI and really make that into a on-premise solution if you can't move your data into the cloud. So from Microsoft's standpoint, from the business intelligence, data analytics, there's a lot coming down the pipe here, and a lot of changes that are going to be made. You know, they're looking at trying to compete with things like business objects. They're looking at Tableau and saying, hey, can we build a report writing tool? You know, from a cost standpoint, most people are running these products anyway, so there's no additional cost that there might be going out and purchasing a Tableau or something like that for your corporate environment. I think that's one of the biggest advantages that we're going to see in our Microsoft products. And then just ease of use. You know, they're very similar to Word and Excel, and people that are familiar with those products are going to really jump in and see these Power BI type solutions to be fairly easy and obtainable. So real quick, gave you a good idea of what's out there. How can Tandem help you? Just so you guys know, we do offer custom Power BI training classes. And the great thing about these classes and the way we do them is you can actually do these classes using your data. So for a lot of people, when you learn a product, and you know, if I show you crime data, you go, okay, that's neat, but it doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. Within Power BI and our customized training, we can actually do that on the data that you choose, and that really helps out and means a lot to people. And then from a SQL side, there are a number of new SQL classes that are coming out. So in the Microsoft training world, SQL is probably one of the highest demands for training that Microsoft sees, and they're responding to that by actually creating a ton of different classes that are very focused on particular parts of SQL. So again, I invite you to go out to our website and check those classes out. Okay. I've come to the end of my presentation, but I do want to open up any questions. So for those who are online, you're more than welcome to unmute and ask a question that you might have. If you don't want to do that, you're also free to place that question into the message box, and I will be happy to answer those. So we've got about 8 minutes left on our time frame, so I will be on here till we're kind of done to answer any questions. So we've actually got one coming in here right now, so let me take a look at that and see if I can answer that. Okay, so question was about licensing. For Power BI Web, what you're looking at is, from a licensing standpoint, only if you need the advanced functionality, which would be the Power BI Pro, do you have to license that per user. And that's about, I think it's about $9.95 $9.95 or $9.99 a month. It's part of the Office 365 platform. It can be purchased separately, but it can also be added if you're already utilizing 365. The biggest thing that the Pro gains is a lot of scheduling, and access to on-premise data through a gateway is a little easier to set up, and then you can actually schedule refreshes. So if I'm looking at let's say a sales dashboard, I want that data in the middle of the night, I want it to go out and refresh for me automatically. With the non-licensed version, those refreshes are a manual process. Now, with that being said, there is ways that your report writers can be using the Pro, but they can share out their dashboards with the users that just have the standard non-cost version. So you can actually mix and match those two together. And then the other question, is it compatible with 2014? It is compatible with 2014 as far as retrieving data, but there's no actual interface in 2014 that revolves around Power BI. So it's not until 16 that we're going to see there's more merging together. So we got here, what industries would be most beneficial for Power BI? Really anybody. Anybody that has access to data is going to see a benefit of Power BI. From an analytics to production, all that can be used to do that. As far as the software itself, that's a free download from Microsoft, so really that's going to be implemented based on individuals' own web access policies or download policies. So definitely you would want to control that, but there's nothing in Power BI directly that does that. Does it work with visually impaired software? I'm going to be perfectly honest, I've not tried it yet with visually impaired software, so I really can't answer that. Microsoft, though, has been really good with supporting any type of disability, so I would assume that it does work well, but I can't answer that directly. Someone asked if there's going to be a recording. Yes, this session is being recorded. We will go in and tweak it a little bit to try to take out any pauses and things like that, and then it will be placed up. You should be receiving an email within the next day that will give you access to that recording. Map with boundary lines is one of the things. From a mapping standpoint, I'm going to pop this back on my screen real quick. There are quite a few options for mapping. With boundary lines, there's a second map, and I will tell you I don't have the right data. So for that mapping to work correctly, you really are going to need the boundary line data that is in there, but there's actually what they call a field map, and you can see just by the look of it, it is actually more of a boundary specific map that can be used. The other possibility would be R. R is a very, very powerful mapping utilities built into it, so that would be your next opportunity for boundary lines, would be to just directly use R inside of the data. But again, R is not supported in the website as of right now. There is a very big possibility it will come that R will be supported, but it's just not ready yet. When are they releasing the full production version? I do not have that answer. Again, they keep releasing it in candidate version, so it's kind of like an ongoing beta product, but it is stable at this point in time. So it's very stable. It's very feature oriented. They were missing a lot of things in the beginning that even me as a report writer and a developer, I was kind of like, oh, we need to be able to do this. At this point now, it's a really good stable product. Can we schedule BI dashboards to be sent via email through reporting service in the SQL 2016? I do not know the answer to that. Okay, right now the reporting service feature in 2016 is still in release candidate, and all the capabilities are not enabled yet. So for some of that stuff, we have not been able to get in and actually test it out. I hope that will be the case, because I think a dashboard through a PDF would be a really nice report to get. But at the moment, I can't answer that question because we just don't know yet. When I find out, or I will be happy to release an update and provide that information. Okay guys, it's about 3 minutes to our scheduled stopping time. I'm going to go ahead and stay online for the next 3 minutes. If you've got any more questions, please feel free to ask. If you don't, again, I appreciate you guys coming in today, and I hope that there's something that Tana can do to help you in the future. So we have another question pop in real quick. How much experience do trainers have in Power BI? The trainers we use have a lot of experience in Power BI. Most of them were using a lot of the tools in Excel. So a lot of the data modeling tools, the Power View tools and stuff like that have been out in Excel for multiple years. A lot of that, they've even helped companies write training, and then they're constantly in Power BI trying to build solutions around that. Now, with that being said, the product itself is changing every month. So I, as a user and a trainer, I know that every time I download a new update, I get in, I start looking around, I go, oh, look, they added a feature that I might not have known about. So, our trainers are very good in that, but like any new product, there's always going to be things that are going to pop up that they didn't know existed even.